questions as well. So then I also need to share my screen. Okay. Maybe I can only share the tab. I think that would do better, I think. Share only Google Chrome. Yeah, I think that's better. Okay. So what I want to actually present here is what's ADR and how can a good ADR get you to be promoted as well. So I guess it's more around documentation. I mean, that's something we do as a business. We do a lot as well. So we go through the different initiatives we have within the project, and each one of them it ends up in a different way. So everyone has got different opinions, obviously, and then I'd say, oh, let's do one, and then the other person says, oh, no, let's do two. So it's always about making decisions. So it's always trade-off. So we have trade-off number one to lose some sort of consistency, and then we have another one which we get availability. So everything gets together to say what actually we need to make a decision. And then ADR is this architecture decision record, which simply you just put in place to say, I want to write it down so the next person wouldn't be confused. So even writing ADR is actually important. So that's something everyone needs to do. And a lot of businesses like ours, we've got this folder, it's full of like ADRs, and then these ADRs are point of reference as well. So, and then, so what does ADR goes through? So ADR is a decision that you make, and for example, a team picked NoSQL with no written rationale. So then 6 months from now, someone's going to ask you, why did you choose NoSQL? And this is a question which no one has answer anymore because either that person is not even in the company or might be that that person doesn't even remember. It was like, we had this, I'm not sure. I think we didn't have SQL database or our company doesn't have a license. So we don't know. So, and then it's easy to forget because it just time passes on, a lot of stuff's changing, and then a decision might change. Sometimes you're like, okay, my decision is only valid for a year. So that's another thing as well. Like, based on the current situation, because our company doesn't have money, we are a startup company, we don't have the investment to go to the enterprise solution. So and then a year from now you want to actually review it. So this is the thing. So you make a decision. If you don't have any written document, it takes 6 months, and then you're like, I don't remember why we did that anymore. And then another like 3 months, a year or 2 years down the line, you're like, oh, we have to migrate because we don't know why we made that decision back in the day. We didn't know when to review it again. So the whole thing ends up costing the business tons of money because now we forgot about why we did what we did. So how can we write an ADR? Is three parts. So the first part is like, oh, it's just explaining what we want to do, which is the situation or constraint is like, oh, we want to actually choose a database, and this database is for this service, and we're supposed to do these things, right? So this is three or four things you just write down as a context, and within the context, you just mention okay, so what I want to actually do. Just keep it short. There's like a lot of ADRs is like so long, but no, you actually want to keep it short because people are not gonna read it. Then the other thing is like you want to make a decision. So either that you had these brainstorming sessions, other meetings, and you ended up with a decision. Whatever the decision is, you end up with a decision. It's like, oh, let's just use Postgres. Or let's just use, for example, chat GPT or just whatever the decisions are like, oh, we go with cloud, then you write that down. But the next thing which is important is like, what was the consequence? So what competition or competitors we actually looked into, and what was the trade-off that we lost because we went with this option. So for example, we go with, for example, this framework, Next.js framework. So we know we're losing a bit of flexibility and speed. So then we know. So later down the line, we know we made this decision and this was the consequence or this was the price that we are paying for this decision as well. Of course, a lot of decisions we gain a lot, but then we always lose something. Is it like because I'm using Fastify.js over Next.js, so then the performance over like the opinionated framework? So there's always a trade-off. And if you don't know the trade-off for your decisions, that means you're not there to be a good solution architect or a good engineer or even go to be promoted. So it's always a trade-off. It's never a decision without a trade-off. So then an ADR, you write it down, a context, the decision you made, and what was the consequences of this decision or what was the trade-offs. Then this is example, like I've got 10,000, for example, requests per second, and this is the amount I'm actually writing to the database. So whatever it is, it might be social media, or I've got this like for writing service for payments that is coming to the system. So whatever it is, this many requests per second are coming to the system and I need to write it down. And now my team needs to make a decision is like we need to choose what database. So is it a structure? It's not structured. These are the questions that we have. We probably go through the meetings and then write them, try to get a bit of brainstorming. And we know we have limitations. We need to deliver it. Sometimes our team they don't know how to work with Postgres or they don't know how to work with DynamoDB. So then these are the limitations that our team has. So it changes the decision. But for any reason, for this scenario, we end up with the Postgres. So how we end up there, that's a different question, but we end up there. And we don't want to question ourselves within 6 months' time to say why we're there. So what was the consequences of choosing Postgres? So because team move fast, our team doesn't know AWS and DynamoDB. So okay, so this is the first thing. Team moves fast. We getting the full asset over Postgres. And this is something which is really important for the payment systems. So this is our the plus. And then we have got the ad hoc reporting queries. So that's also really important because we get better reporting as well. But what we are actually losing, we don't have horizontal scaling through um, these Postgres because everything has to be either vertical or we have to go sharding. So we're losing the horizontal scaling. So we know in the future when we get more or we're passing the 100K, then this decision has a trade-off that we have to scale and we have to have a complex system to scale it. So we accepted the risk that our current peak is 10,000, so maybe 100,000 is way in the future, so we're not gonna do it. And then revisit at 50K because this is a key part. So maybe at that point, we're gonna choose a different server, different cloud infrastructure. Maybe the pricing becomes really important. So the revisiting, which is what's important, so it actually shows that you are a staff level, is you know when to look back to this ADR because most of the decisions is always an issue. It's like someone's made it, but I don't know, can I question that decision or is it like as something that is everyone agrees on? And it's really hard to question why did we choose this, because a lot of people are like, oh, you don't know. Like you might get offended. Like you might actually get them offended. So you're not gonna ask that question anytime. But if you have it written, That's a good point. Like every junior engineer, every mid-level, they actually look into that. It was like, oh, we are actually at the 50K. So ADR also says to revisit it. So maybe I can actually look into this more. So this is a level that's like if someone mentions that, I know they are more experienced. So this is like another one. We can go through it as well. So if I go with the notification system and then because of the notification, I have options, right? So one of my options is okay, so let's choose like writing our own queue, which is okay. So I want to have the queue in the backend, and then every action happens goes to this queue, and then I want to push it one after another to the client. Or I actually integrate SQS, which is one of the AWS systems, with the pops up. So I have pops up with the SQS, and then that's the way I integrate my notification system. So I know for sure when I go with this SQS, I have to pay for it. There's actually an AWS system. I have to integrate with AWS. So what's the context? So the context is we got a lot of notifications. I don't know how many. We probably have around like 5,000 notifications per minute or per hour, depends what it is. And then because of that, you say, okay, so I've got this context, and our company is doesn't know how to work with AWS, or we're not even in that stack. So and we are fine doing our own queue. So let's just go with our queue. So the context was we want to send it, we want to send tons of notifications, around like 5,000, but we have the server to actually do it. So our decision ends up saying, okay, so we're going to go and implement our own queue, which is important. So what was the consequences of that? It's like, okay, so we added a bit more code to our system. So we complicated our system a little. We have a queue to manage now. Someone needs to look into this queue, make sure we're actually parsing it correctly. Um, if it our queue is it like how what happens if you have two services, what happens, so we actually add complexity. Is also because of the queue. Now we need how we can actually extend the queue. So like how many messages can queue hold, and how we can actually send it to the next service. And then we also lose a bit of like reliability over the system, because our queue sits within the service, and if our service for any reason just shuts down, then we lose the queue. So these are the trade-offs I'm actually making, and I know I'm actually saving money. So when do we want to revisit it? Is it like, okay, so I think if we get around 10,000 per, for example, hour, this is a good part, because now the queue, and then if we have two services running in parallel, now is a good time to revisit it again. So that's the way we go and try to write that down. And this is gonna be a good ADR. So the three reasons ADR end up in a promotion packet is because if you start writing them, I mean, most of the times because no one asks you, you're not gonna write them as well. But if you start writing them, that actually says you're putting visibility on the decisions. You give everyone a chance to give you feedback. So this is also important. And if someone comes in the company, they don't have to question a lot of stuff. Say, why did we choose this? Or what was the reason? Sometimes just a licensing, sometimes just because we are enterprise, sometimes because they don't have servers within our country. So whatever it is, it's good to write it down, because it's hard to guess. And I've had I had these issues a lot of times, because I end up asking like, oh, I think one time I asked them, why don't we do mobile end-to-end tests using this framework? And they said, because we tested it 3 years ago and that framework failed. And I was like, 3 years passed, so maybe stuff's changed. So it was no decision written, and it was no revisiting note. And they thought because 3 years ago it wasn't working, it's not going to work now as well. Turns out they tried it again and it was working. So But it was really hard for me to ask that questions of the higher level engineers with the company because they they act like they know better, right? So, and then it shows that you're senior because juniors are kind of just talking about decisions, and you're like, oh, I've heard about this one, I've heard about that other one. Seniors are actually documented, but principal engineers, they just build this culture that just let's just revisit and look into our ADRs and point out that we need to write it down for everyone else as well. So if you go with the perfect ADR, this is kind of a promise for you to get to the next rounds of promotion. So this is pretty much the reason why I said someone can be a staff engineer or they can step up to be a staff engineer. This is one of the things they need to do. So I think we've got another one, but I think it's a bit late as well. So I'm not sure if you guys has any questions, but feel free to ask if you have any. Hello, everyone. We kind of went through the whole thing quickly. So I started with this presentation on ADRs. It's around architecture decision records, and we went with decisions and consequences, and then we went with decisions, and then we went to what was the consequence of not making it, and then we went with decisions, and this was the good example of how ADR looks like, and then three reasons why the ADR actually um, gets you to be promoted as well. Um, if you guys have any questions, otherwise, yeah, I think we can finish it here as well. Thank you, and have a good time, guys.